In Tamil Nadu over washing clothes, police hunt for the accused Neta and his cronies. Fight over a revered Shiva shrine now between Assam and Maharashtra. Government head of Assam claims that the sixth Jyotirling is in Kamrup. Uddhav Sena says it's in Pune instead. The government approves the construction of a Shinku-La tunnel in Ladakh for all-weather connectivity, gives nod to raise 7 new ITPP battalions. Europe's biggest airline group, Lufthansa, cancels reroutes flights after an IT outage due to construction work at Frankfurt Airport. Britain's King Charles' wife, Queen Consort Camilla, won't wear the disputed Kohinoor diamond during her coronation. Reports suggest choice influenced by diplomatic sensitivities. And death toll from Turkey and Syria earthquakes crosses 40,000. More people found alive as rescue efforts continue for over 200 hours. But tonight's big story at this moment, an income tax survey on the BBC offices is still underway. More than 48 hours since it began now on Tuesday morning, more than 36 hours after it began on Tuesday morning. No official statement yet from the Income Tax Department, only quoting sources claiming that transfer pricing alleged irregularities are being looked at. Security, meanwhile, has been ramped up and ITBP Jawans have been deployed at the BBC's India Delhi office after the Hindu Sena had staged protests there. So it's 36 hours now, no statement yet from the income tax authorities to explain why exactly they are investigating the BBC's office. Munish Pandey, who tracks the agencies for us, joins us at the moment. Munish, what exactly do we know about these searches and surveys? Because till now, all the information that is coming out is through sources, no official statement from the IT. What exactly are they looking for?
Well, Rajdeep, this is true that the Income Tax Department is yet to release an official statement regarding the survey which they are conducting at the premises of BBC. As far as the procedure is concerned, remember, during this survey, the Income Tax Department can go through all the documents and it can last even for 3 to 4 days. And after the survey is over, then only they will release a statement. That is the official process which the Income Tax Department follows. But as far as the sources within the agency are concerned, what we have been given to understand is that this is regarding transfer pricing. And regarding this, there were several notices sent to the BBC and BBC officials in last 2 years. But because there was no response from BBC, they decided to conduct a survey on the premises linked to BBC in Mumbai and Delhi. But as far as the charges, specific charges against BBC are concerned, the IT officials or the department are yet to give any official statement regarding the charges.
Can you tell us what exactly is this transfer pricing, which is being seen as a potential area where, according to sources again, the BBC may have committed irregularities? What are these transfer prices?
Well, Rajdeep, in layman language, whatever services you are providing, whatever goods you are selling, or whatever business you are doing, between the entities, if you are paying the taxes as per Indian law, then there is no illegality. But in case of BBC, not only this year, not only the recent survey or the recent charges against BBC according to sources, but also in year 2002 and 3, there was specific allegation against BBC even at that point of time. That was for transfer pricing. And even then, the BBC and BBC officials were sent notices by the Income Tax Department during that point of time. So there have been specific allegations even in 2002 and 3. Then there were several notices sent to BBC and BBC officials in later years regarding different charges of IT laws, violation of IT laws. And as far as the recent, this action by the IT department is concerned, sources are saying it is against regarding the transfer of prices.
Okay, of course, all of this coming within weeks of that BBC documentary on the Gujarat violence. So Munish Pandey, appreciate your joining us. As I said, and Munish said there, information still sketchy. It's over 36 hours now since the income tax sleuths are still surveying the BBC's Delhi and Mumbai offices over these alleged tax irregularities by the British broadcaster. But the fact is, because this survey comes weeks after that contentious BBC documentary on the 2002 Gujarat violence, it has predictably raised a political controversy. Is the government of the day continuing to target anyone who criticizes it? And how does this play out globally is the big story. Take a look.
Over 24 hours and counting. From Delhi to Mumbai, income tax officers have been conducting searches in the BBC's offices since Tuesday morning over alleged tax irregularities by the British broadcaster. The company has asked its India employees to be ready for questioning and cooperate in the ongoing probe. They have also reassured employees that their personal tax records will not be scrutinized. But how is the world reacting to this survey of BBC offices? The UK and US governments have taken note of the searches but have not offered any endorsement or condemnation. Meanwhile, the political showdown over the IT department searches continues as the opposition accused the Modi government of targeting BBC after the Modi documentary.
I don't believe this, that because BBC is doing something against of this government, and that's why just next day they started their operation like this. This is very unfortunate, and this is a political vendetta. BJP is running the government through this vendetta only.
BBC जैसी जो क्रेडिबल एजेंसी है, न्यूज एजेंसी है, उस पे छापा मारते हो, उस पे रेड करते हो, तो मैसेज क्या जाता है बाहर? दूसरी तरफ से गरीबों के घर डेमोलिश कर रहे हो, तो उसका मैसेज क्या जाता है बाहर? उसका मैसेज बहुत खराब जाता है कि जो हिंदुस्तान है वो आगे जाने के बजाय पीछे जा रहा है.
The BJP meanwhile has dismissed the opposition's attacks, deeming the tax evasion charges against BBC serious.
जब ये सर्वे का काम पूरा होता है तब वो अपना एक प्रेस नोट या प्रेस ब्रीफिंग करके जानकारी देते हैं. तो मुझे लगता है जब ये इनकम टैक्स विभाग का सर्वे पूरा होगा वो जानकारी पूरी आपको डिटेल में दे देंगे. और कोई भी देश में न्याय से ऊपर तो या हमारी जो कानून व्यवस्था है उससे ऊपर तो कोई नहीं हो सकता.
Sources have informed India Today that the searches may continue for 3 days in all, and then all eyes will be on the IT officers as the department will have to explain exactly what prompted these searches and what was found. With Aishwarya Paliwal and Divyesh Singh, Bureau Report, India Today.
So let's raise the big question. Is the Modi government now at war with the BBC? Will this entire battle hit India's global image in any way, particularly in a year when India is the G20 president? Is it wise to take on the BBC in a crucial year like this? Farooq Dhondi, author, columnist, joins me from London. Kanwal Sibal, former Foreign Secretary, is with me. And KC Singh, former Secretary, Ministry of External Affairs, with you. Thank you all very much for joining us. Before I come to you, I just want to play how the international media is reacting to this. Just take a look at some of the comments that we are getting at the moment. Washington Post, Indian government raids BBC offices in wake of documentary critical of Modi. Take a look at what the New York Times is saying. Indian tax agents raid BBC offices after airing of documentary critical of Prime Minister Modi. The Wall Street Journal, again, Indian authorities search BBC offices after contentious Modi documentary. These are just some of the headlines I'm playing out. CNN, Indian authorities raid BBC offices after broadcast of the Modi documentary. The Guardian, in London, BBC offices in India raided by tax officials amidst Modi documentary fallout. And Al Jazeera, Indian tax agents raid BBC offices in wake of Modi documentary. All of these, Kanwal Sibal, are linking the raids to the Modi documentary. To that extent, Is this terrible optics for the government, or do you believe the government can ride out this storm?
Oh, I don't think it's much of a problem, though, of course, Washington Post, New York Times, Guardian, Al Jazeera, Wall Street Journal that you have cited, they have always written very negatively about India. Now, if they were writing objectively about India, then whatever they write negatively, it can be then assessed on merits. But if they have this long-standing animosity towards India, everything Indian, then I think we should take it in our stride, because all this is predictable.
No, but with due regard, Mr. Sibal, can we completely identify India and the Modi government? They may be critical of the Modi government. That doesn't mean they are critical of India.
Of course, it is like that. After all, it's the Prime Minister of India, is the ruling party of India. Now, how do you dissociate the ruling party and the Prime Minister from India? The target is both the Prime Minister, BJP, and India. It's absolutely right. So you can't say the Prime Minister doesn't represent India. Can we take that position? Or the BJP as the majority party in the country doesn't represent the majority of Indians? Of course.
No, but when they criticize the Modi government, are they criticizing India in your view?
Of course, because they are attacking the governance of India. They are attacking the policies that the government of India is pursuing in India. They are actually denigrating the Prime Minister, and through that, India and how it is governed and its image. It's all interlinked. You can't separate the Prime Minister from India. Definitely not.
But should we therefore, in your view, ignore what the foreign media says? Should we, particularly this G20 year, when we have the presidency,
Rajdeep,
ignore what they're saying?
Rajdeep, two things. When you say foreign media, what you really mean is Anglo-Saxon media. The rest of the world is not bothered one bit. You think that ASEAN is bothered, or Africa is bothered, or Latin America is bothered, or the Central Asian states are bothered, Russia is bothered, China is bothered? Not at all. They all suffered at the hands of the BBC. So they'll be quite happy that some government has the courage to actually deal with BJP as they should be dealt with if they are transgressing the law. They will applaud.
BBC, Freudian slip.
BBC, yes. That they should deal with BBC the way it should be dealt with if they transgress the law. It's only the Anglo-Saxon world. And they've always been very critical. Even in the Anglo-Saxon world, much of East Europe will not do this. The Italians and the Spanish are not particularly concerned. It's the British, the Germans now, I see that they become very critical. The French media is critical, and of course, the United States media. So let's not be impressed too much by foreign condemnation. It is actually very limited in terms of the West, and we have suffered at their hands for a long time. As for G20, and I'll finish with that.
Yes.
I would agree that G20 is a time when they could exploit this in order to make it a little awkward for India. I mean the international press. On the other hand, I think the answer to that is that when you criticize the government of India and taking some action against BBC, has this media ever criticized the banning of all Russian media in their own countries? What happens to freedom of expression in that case? What happens to the public being properly informed of what is happening, have an alternative view, accept dissent? They want to protect their public from anything that comes from Russia because they feel insecure that the truth may come out. Now, if they're so worried about that as mature democracies, then I think we have answers if there's any criticism on that score. And they're coming to the G20. It's not as if they're not members of the G20. So they're not worried about what impression this will create on the global South, which is watching all this.
Okay, so you're saying this has very limited impact globally. You want to respond, Farooq Dodi, that this is Kanwal Sibal almost hinting that this is the Anglo-Saxon world, the Western world in a way, looking at India through their lens and drawing this link between the Modi documentary and the raids on the BBC. India shouldn't be too worried. It will not affect India's global image. Even the British government is silent.
Well, the British government has nothing to do with criticizing the Modi government as such. It makes deals with them and so on. But in any democracy, in any liberal, proper democracy, one has to separate the government from the country. Why? Because the government is not permanent in a democracy. It's by definition something that can change in short periods of time. There are other places which are not democracies, like China and Russia, and they sit on their media. They stop any negative image coming through to their populations. But in India, which professes to be a democracy, which has a democratic constitution, it is wrong for the government to step on freedom of speech, to stop people writing about or criticizing the government. And what was being said is quite wrong. The BBC always criticizes its own government. There's no problem about them saying that Liz Truss, the ex-prime minister, was wrong in what she was doing. I saw 10 programs which said that. There was no problem with the BBC saying that Boris Johnson had run Partygate and gone against his own laws and regulations. There's always criticism of government policy on the BBC. That's what the BBC is for. Now, obviously, the viewing public of the West might begin to think that the Modi government is censorious. Why? Because it is. It does ban this and stop that. And then, instead of defending themselves fact by fact against the documentaries that were shown on the BBC, I don't know, I will not make a judgment about the truth or the lies of them, but if the Modi government and India are against what the documentaries were saying, they should have taken the documentaries apart and said, this is wrong, this is factually wrong, because I read some pieces in the Indian press which said that the Supreme Court has
are you therefore saying that this will in any way affect the global image of the Modi government? Do you really believe that the BBC has that kind of clout today?
Yes, I do. I believe that it will affect the image, but that will not affect the way that the Indian public votes. If the Indian public votes for the BJP, well, the BJP win the election and they become the government. That's the fact of democracy. That's the fact of the constitution.
But in a way, therefore, KC Singh, what we are seeing is, here's Kanwal Sibal saying this is a bit of an Anglo-Saxon conspiracy. The rest of the world couldn't care. Farooq Dhondi saying the BBC still has that kind of clout. It is being seen as an assault on the freedom of the press. How do you see it? Do you really believe that the Modi government should be worried about how the international media opinion sees raids being or surveys taking place on the BBC? Or should we just brazen it out and say, look, we will let our income tax authorities carry out their investigation. We're not worried whether it's the BBC, the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal or anyone for that matter?
Rajdeep, we can take the cynical stand and agree with Mr. Sibal and say, who gives a damn what the world is saying? But at the same time, we do quote the world. We need global investment. And we must make a distinction between what those governments will do. They will approach cynically, and they were more excited yesterday about the planes that we ordered from Airbus and Boeing.
That's right.
Including the president of US giving a very laudatory statement, rather than freedom of expression or documentary not being shown in India. But that is how it has always been.
Yes.
But there is a democratic recession in the world, and this is being debated. For instance, the latest index of economists, we can say it's another Anglo-Saxon publication, puts both US and India in the category of flawed democracies. Full democracies are only a few in Europe, not all of them, because even within the European Union, you have a fascist right-wing prime minister, though she's behaving herself in Italy. So democracy can also throw up governments which do not always protect democratic freedoms. Electoral democracy is one thing, but liberal democracy is another thing. Now, as far as Indian image is concerned, I totally agree with Mr. Dhondi that it's an image in continuum. What makes India attractive to countries like US or countries in the West is both her economy, both her geopolitical importance, but on a more lasting basis, being a democracy as compared to China.
But it's never affected the rise of China. But Mr. KC saying the fact that China is seen as a country where there are these curbs on the free press has never affected the rise of China. You just mentioned most of these leaders yesterday were speaking about the Airbus, the Boeing deal. They're not worried about a raid on BBC.
Absolutely correct. And that is why all through the 80s and 90s, China was rising because US was focused elsewhere. All through the 80s, the Americans ignored the nuclear bomb and the existence between China, a cooperation between China and the Pakistanis until the Soviets had left Afghanistan. So there is cynicism
Right.
and in geopolitics. By the same time, remember, Biden came into government promising that he's going to focus on democracy. Unfortunately, he's been derailed by COVID and derailed by the Ukraine war. He had a summit in December of 21. The next democracy summit is due in a month's time. It's in March 2023.
Right.
How do we look there when we go on a global forum and we are invited as a democracy, and then this news seeps through? So it doesn't affect our relations immediately, but does affect the thinking of the congressman, thinking of the elite in that country. We can be cynical and say we don't give a damn. They'll come to India because they need us. But at the same time, what kind of an India do we want to make? And that is why opposition is so agitated in India. The liberal democracies may not be agitated because they have economic interests. They are interested in business in India. They are interested in geopolitical importance of India. But to continue India on an upward climb and retain the image we've had since 47, except for the period of emergency, I think it's important that we safeguard that image. We can be cynical. We can say it won't.
Let me take that to Kanwal Sibal. Kanwal Sibal, are you being, as KC Singh seems to suggest, being a little too cynical about it? Don't worry about the world. Geopolitics, geoeconomics, India is an economic superpower. Who's worried about what happens with a Modi documentary or tax rates on the BBC? Is that the line you're trying to take here today? We shouldn't be too worried about what the foreign media says about us.
But do you think the United States or Britain or anybody else are worried about what they're doing in Europe in trying to suppress access altogether to Russian media? None of the BBC or anybody else will bring on into the discussion anybody who would defend the Russian position, or not only that.
But does this does our sir, with due regard, does this affect our standing as a liberal democracy?
So hold on. Not only that, anybody who would talk about dialogue and diplomacy, they are not allowed to express their dissent in the media, whether it is written or a visual.
Does this affect our standing as a liberal democracy? If within weeks of a documentary critical of the Prime Minister or the government of the Modi government during the Gujarat violence, the BBC is raided?
The point is that, do you think that these countries are worried about their own image when they do the kind of things they're doing in terms of actually violating their own values blatantly, not only with regard to the media and so many other areas? Do you think they're worried? It's because we have this complex that somehow we have to be in the good books and be praised by these guys. These guys have no complex. They will do what they want. They will violate all their principles, as they are doing in so many fields, economic, security, cultural, religious, whatever have you. Press, of course. I don't think we should have that mindset.
So you're saying these countries are guilty of double standards. You're saying these countries are guilty of double standards.
Absolutely.
They have no reason to lecture us on democratic values. Farooq Dondi, you want to respond to that, what you're hearing? Or do you believe that India needs to, in a way, be conscious that one of our great advantages in the world is that we are perceived as a liberal democracy that allows a free press?
We should be perceived as a liberal democracy that allows a free press. If all these commentators are saying that there is no effect of the BBC documentary, that it's irrelevant, then why have they banned it? Why don't they take it apart, as in any liberal democracy one ought to do in the freedom of expression, and say this fact is wrong because, that fact is wrong because the BBC has made a mistake, or that the BBC has viciously libeled the Modi government.
But what if the BBC has committed tax irregularities? What if the BBC has committed tax irregularities?
Not ban it and raid the BBC for income tax purposes. I don't understand what income the BBC has, apart from the fees that we pay the BBC as British citizens. What income tax business does the BBC have at all? And besides, don't confuse the BBC with the British government. They are separate organizations, and the BBC religiously maintains its independence. And the fact that Russia is not represented on the BBC is wrong. I have very often almost most days when you report the Ukrainian war,
Right.
you have somebody in Moscow saying what the Moscow public are thinking, what the Russians allow their public to see and don't allow them to see.
Come on.
Why is the Russian
Come on, they banned RT.
And-
Come on, they banned Sputnik. They banned all Russian media. The fact that Russia has not banned
they're not putting the Russian point of
in
view,
favor of Russia.
but they're reporting from Russia.
Okay, let
Yes.
me just stop, gentlemen, the two of you, for a final word from you, KC Singh, because there will be those who will say, look, this is also an opportunity. You've already seen the Hindu Sena, surround the BBC office today, that the BBC is anti-India. Do you think this pitch will work, that the BBC is anti-India? It has, in the past, never shown the map of Kashmir the way India wants to, has at times gone against the stated official position of the government of India. Will it work or not? A quick answer.
Rajdeep, didn't we see this documentary play out under Mrs. Gandhi? All this has been tried then, right up to the emergency. There was a similar kind of intolerance then, and what was the net result? She was shown the door once. So Indian public is very shrewd. They know what is the difference between India and the Indian government. They give a lot of leeway to the Indian government. But at the same time, they realize where the lines are crossed. They realize where personal interests of people, where touchiness on certain things start impacting on India's image. Now, even the common man, if you ask him if he's on the street, he may not be aware of it. But sooner or later, if you keep doing it, they realize that government is being strong-armed and shouldn't be doing this. Because basically, we are a decent country. Basically, we are a decent lot of people who don't like to use those methods against us or against the others.
Okay.
And that is the selling point of India. And if we start diluting it and become a more right-wing, very assertive, intolerant government, then that image will take a while to damage India's overall image. But it's inevitable. For instance, I told you about The Economist. Now, in amongst the flawed democracies, the US has also been put. It's not that they're just pillaring India. Even US post-Trump is seen as a flawed democracy. So therefore, it is not that they don't point a finger at themselves.
Let
so
me
they
leave it
realize
there.
this.
Let
And so
me leave
let's see
it
what
there, because we've had three different divergent views. And in a sense, that's why we are a democracy. That we can, on primetime television, still debate it without me fearing that someone is about to come and raid me in the office at the moment and ask me about my income. I can assure you I'm more than prepared for that. But the fact is, we still have, I hope, a free press. And the freedom means not mirroring what the government wants to hear, but asking the hard question. That's what we will continue to do on the news today. I appreciate my guests joining me. Now, all of this, and we heard a bit of that, comes against the backdrop of that big mega Air India deal, because that's the one that's making all the buzz, globally at least. Air India all set to buy 470 planes from Airbus and Boeing in the world's biggest commercial jet deal. Now, this comes, of course, as the former national carrier embarks on a brand new journey with the Tatas to reclaim its glorious past. The deal has been hailed by the Biden administration, by the French government, by the Sunak government in the United Kingdom. Is India, therefore, on the verge of becoming, in a way, a global economic power, and that will, in a way, be our defining image? Here's a report.
A video conference of two world leaders and a business house becomes the platform for the announcement of one of the world's biggest commercial jet deals.
We have signed a letter of intent to acquire 250 aircrafts.
What followed, the understated yet dramatic announcement, were glimpses of global power play.
एयर इंडिया और एयरबस का समझौता भारत फ्रांस स्ट्रैटेजिक पार्टनरशिप के लिए भी एक महत्वपूर्ण उपलब्धि है। मुझे ये जानकर भी खुशी है कि फ्रेंच कंपनी साफरान विमानों के इंजन की सर्विस के लिए भारत में सबसे बड़ी MRO फैसिलिटी स्थापित कर रही है।
Airbus is contributing to the outstanding development of India, and the new 250 aircrafts, which will be delivered to Air India, will be one more step in this direction.
Shortly after the Airbus deal became public on Tuesday, came another one. Air India is also purchasing 220 planes from American company Boeing. Soon, Prime Minister Modi dialed US President Joe Biden. More statements followed. President Biden said the landmark deal will help support 1 million American jobs in 44 US states.
The President spoke with the Prime Minister of India earlier today. They discussed the historic agreement for Air India to purchase over 200 American-made aircraft from Boeing. And the two leaders reaffirmed the strength of the U.S.-India relationship and committed to continue working together and in groups like the Quad to advance economic growth for our two countries.
Put together, Air India's deals with Airbus and Boeing are worth $80 billion, the biggest aviation deal ever that ticks many boxes. It benefits India, US, France and the UK too. Given that the British Rolls-Royce engines power Airbus aircraft. British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak tweeted, "The deal will create jobs across the country." The record-breaking deals by an Indian business house, fated by 3 advanced economies, also showcased India's standing in the global market. Bureau Report, India Today.
So what does the world's biggest aviation deal mean for India? That's the question I want to raise. Ashok Mago is the founding chairman, US-India Chamber of Commerce. He joins me from America. And Jitendra Bhargav, former executive director, Air India, author The Descent of Air India, joins me. Jitendra Bhargav, to you first. What does this mean for Air India? It's one thing for Joe Biden to say million jobs, 44 states. What does this really mean for India and more importantly, Air India?
Rajdeep, I couldn't get your question, I think, because the sound is a little low.
Can I repeat it? What does this mean for Air India and India? We know what it means for the Americans are claiming it means jobs for them, but what does it really mean for us?
Oh, it's a great thing for Air India and for the India. Let's put it this way. India has been a growing market for more than 10 years now. But all of the market was being taken away by the Gulf carriers and the Southeast Asian carriers because India did not have an airline which had the wherewithal to add capacity at the pace at which the market was growing. Air India having been disinvested, now with the Tatas, they have the wherewithal, the funds, the resources, the vision. And they made it very clear when they regained control of Air India that they will make Air India a world-class airline. And in quest of the same objective, they're moving with 470 aircraft order. What does it mean for the Indians? A, people in India, connectivity from their cities, option of another airline besides the Indigo, which dominates the domestic skies. For the international Indian diaspora abroad, connectivity. At the moment, Air India operates 47 flights a week to United States, 5 cities. There are many cities which are not served in United States where you have large Indian concentration. So once you have a 70 long-haul, large capacity aircraft inducted, you will see this emerging that Indians will start patronizing. Why waste your time in Dubai, Abu Dhabi on your way to India or on your way out of India? So this is the one big objective. Second is, where are the jobs going to be created when you have Indian carriers? Or if when the Emirates take away, they hire the pilots, they hire the cabin crew there. When you have an Indian carrier operating, growing at the way Tatas are proposing to, jobs get created in India. Pilots, cabin crew, maintenance engineers, everyone. So it's a total win-win situation for the Indian
You don't see any downside? You don't see any downside at all in the fact that maybe in this expansion, first you've got to get the branding right. You're going to have to ensure that Air India gets its branding, revives its image before it's able to compete globally with the likes of Emirates.
Rajdeep, let me explain to you here. Air India, ever since it came under Tatas, has been expanding operations. The first mode they adopted was the leasing of aircraft. Then they have been able to restore some of the aircraft which were on ground for want of spares because their vendors were not paid during the government ownership of Air India. The third phase is the induction of new aircraft. 25 737-800s, 6 Airbus 350s will be inducted in the second half of this year. Now, your question. should you wait for the perception to change and then bring it? By the time the stranglehold of the other airlines will only increase. The faster Air India goes, the better perception will change gradually. The product quality that the new aircraft will offer will match the best in the world. And as Mr. Ratan Tata said when Air India is in control, that we will ensure that the JRD Tata's dream is relived. We realized the dream of JRD Tata. And what was JRD Tata's dream? That India must have a world-class airline.
So you're saying this is a step-by-step process towards that goal of becoming a world-class airline. But Ashok Mago, do you know, at the moment, the aircraft will be manufactured in France, the engines will be United Kingdom, the US will manufacture the Boeings. They benefit. Do you believe India benefits too?
Yes, I think India benefits because, as your other speaker mentioned, right now the Gulf airlines are taking most of the business. Just in the neighborhood where I live, in the Dallas area, there are more than 300,000 Indians who live here. Texas, which has an economy of $2 trillion, have the second largest Indian population in USA. We don't have any direct flight from Dallas or Houston. Hopefully, with Air India buying these planes, we will have that service.
So you're saying this will in a way improve connectivity. This will in a way make Air India competitive in a global market. That's the point you're making. Am I correct, Mr. Mago?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. Mr. Bhargava, you know, as someone who has often written about the descent of Air India into chaos, particularly when it was run by the government of India, it's ironic that the government of India today is almost taking the credit for Air India now being run by Tatas and getting these 470 aircraft.
They're not totally wrong. The government decision to disinvest, number one, which took it to a logical end, notwithstanding the kind of opposition it faced from within the airline and outside. And this becomes a role model for all private public sector companies which are not doing well, which are in a competitive environment, to say, look, take the example of Air India now. Look at the kind of change Air India's future gets into with the private ownership. There are no fear on jobs. Go ahead and see, take pride in the fact that your company, which wasn't doing well till recently, facing the prospects of shutting down, is now thriving and is going to give competition to the best airlines in the world. So it's a win-win situation. I'm not grudging. And Prime Minister's presence could have been a positive impact, that you've got better deal out of them and to manufacture more components of the aircraft that one can do. So it's a good situation. I don't think anybody takes credit for it. It's ultimately Air India which is going to be benefiting. And as my co-panelist said, the Indians who were looking forward to expansion of flight frequencies network in the United States will be also big gainers.
Okay. The good news, of course, is therefore that brand India in a way gets a lift off. So you've got the BBC story where opinion is divided as to why exactly should the government of India go after BBC, and perhaps that damages India's global image as a liberal democracy. And here, when it comes to Air India, clearly India's image gets a lift. That's the nature of the world at the moment. Let's turn from there to the other big story tonight. The horrors of that Shraddha Walkar murder are still fresh in many of our memories. Remember, one of the most grisly murders of recent times. 3 months later, a similar chilling murder has come to light in the national capital. Nikki Yadav was strangled by her live-in partner Sahil. Her body was shoved into a fridge, and the killer got married hours after murdering the woman he had been in a relationship with for 5 years. Take a look.
Shraddha Walkar and Nikki Yadav, victims of two horrifying murders, with the same modus operandi and motive. Bodies of the two live-in partners stored in fridges, and in both instances, the killers were chillingly remorseless. A terrifying rerun of the Shraddha murder case in Delhi. 22-year-old Nikki Yadav strangled by her live-in partner, 24-year-old Sahil Gehlot, earlier this month, after a heated tiff over his impending marriage. The accused strangled Nikki with a mobile charging cable in this car after she questioned his marriage. After murdering his partner, Sahil drove for 40 kilometers with the body, finally dumping the lifeless body in the fridge of a dhaba in Delhi's Najafgarh. And believe it or not, moments after the murder, killer Sahil went ahead and got married to another girl the very same day.
इस वक्त हम मौजूद हैं बाबा हरिदास नगर पुलिस स्टेशन में और ये जो गाड़ी आप सफेद रंग की देख रहे हैं यही वो वरना कार है जो साहिल गहलोत की है। ये गोवा का रजिस्ट्रेशन नंबर है, आप देखिए। इसी गाड़ी में वो रात में घूम रहा था 9 और 10 की रात, और उसके बाद उसने कॉल करके निक्की यादव को बुलाया। निक्की यादव जब पहुंचती है तो इसी गाड़ी में दोनों दिल्ली की सड़कों पर घूमते रहते हैं। 9 तारीख को इसकी सगाई हो गई थी साहिल गहलोत की, लेकिन 10 को शादी थी। जब ये जानकारी निक्की को लगी तो निक्की और साहिल के बीच झगड़ा शुरू हो गया।
India Today accessed Nikki's CCTV images moments before she went to meet Sahil and got murdered. Unlike Shraddha's missing body parts, cops recovered a fully preserved body of Nikki from the fridge of the dhaba.
बाहरी दिल्ली का ये इलाका है नजफगढ़ के आगे। ये ढाबा, ये बंद सा इलाका है, ये ऐसा नहीं कि ये ढाबा वर्किंग है। यहाँ पर एक फ्रिज में ला करके उसने निक्की की लाश को रख दी थी क्योंकि उसकी शादी थी। अब पुलिस ये पता लगाने की कोशिश कर रही है कि किस तरीके से उसकी आगे प्लानिंग क्या थी, वो बॉडी को कैसे ठिकाने लगाने वाला था।
फोन्स में जो भी डाटा है उसको रिकवर करेंगे और जो जहाँ वो उसको घुमा के लेके गया मर्डर के दौरान, वहाँ की कोशिश कर रहे हैं अगर सीसीटीवी फुटेज वगैरह मिल जाए। हालांकि रात का समय है तो वो सारे साक्ष्य हम जुटा रहे हैं।
Nikki's father said his family was unaware about Nikki's relationship and Sahil had misled him about her whereabouts. The family also made a desperate plea for justice.
कानून जो कानून है देश की जी, तो अम्बेडकर की जो कानून है बनाई है अम्बेडकर ने, उस कानून में जो फैसला वो फैसला होगा। अगर नहीं होगा तो हम अपने हाथ से फैसला करेंगे, कोई दिक्कत नहीं है।
अब ये जो घटना हो गई है तो आपकी क्या मांग है, क्या चाहते हैं सर?
हमारी तो मांग ये है जी, हमारी बेटी का कत्ल कर दिया गया तो उसको सजा मौत होनी चाहिए।
While Shraddha's family still awaits justice, will it be any different for Nikki Yadav's near ones? With Himanshu Mishra, Arvind Ojha and Akshay Dongre in Delhi, Bureau Report, India Today.
Justice needed in all such cases, swift justice and sure justice. Let's turn from there to our ground report today that comes from Jharkhand's Palamu, where communal clashes over the Mahashivratri preparations resulted in clashes between two groups over the setting up of a Toran gate, a traditional decorative hanging. The argument escalated into a scuffle, leaving over 6 people and police officials injured. Take a look.
Stone pelting, houses attacked, and vehicles vandalized. Communal clashes erupted in Jharkhand's Palamu over Mahashivratri preparations. Violence took place after a group allegedly vandalized Toran Gate, a traditional decorative hanging built for the Shivratri festival.
सन्नाटा पसरा है पूरे इलाके में, सिर्फ और सिर्फ सुरक्षा कर्मी आपको दिखेंगे, लेकिन इस बात का प्रमाण भी दिखेगा कि उस वक्त किस तरह से ये पूरा इलाका जो है अशांति में तब्दील हो गया था। यहाँ देखिए ग्लासेस, विंडो पैन जो है उसको स्मैश कर दिया गया है, वो टूटे हुए हैं। इस गाड़ी का वही हाल है, इधर आप देखें इस गाड़ी का भी वही हाल है।
The argument between the two communities escalated into a scuffle and soon both indulged in stone pelting prompting intervention by police.
बड़ी मुश्किल से स्थिति को नियंत्रण में किया गया, जिसमें हमारे लेस्लीगंज एसडीपीओ, अफसर इंचार्ज और इंस्पेक्टर को चोटें आई है, 4 जवानों को भी चोट आई है, लेकिन हम लोग कंट्रोल किए, संयम बरतते हुए कंट्रोल करते।
Prohibitory orders are imposed in Panki and more than 100 personnel deployed to maintain peace. The police have managed to ensure peace, but the situation remains tense. Bureau Report, India Today.
Troubling images there from Jharkhand. Let's take a break at this point. When we return, we'll turn to our good news today story. The country's first transgender ward inaugurated in Mumbai. We'll tell you more. You're watching the news today. News without the noise.
तो जैसे सबसे तेज आपकी टैगलाइन है, तो इसी तरह से सबसे तेज हमारी सरकार की लाइफलाइन है।
Thank Mr. Puri.
I thank you for giving me the chance to address you.
Terrorism now a global issue.
The First Lady position is so unusual.
Never in my career